March 17, 1943. Tirpitz Ufer 76-78, Berlin. The folder struck the mahogany desk so hard that coffee spilled from Admiral Wilhelm Canaris's porcelain cup, splashing across intelligence reports that would have meant execution if the Gestapo had discovered them. Impossible. The Americans must be feeding us propaganda through turned agents. Through the tall windows of Abwehr headquarters, Canaris could see the Landwehr Canal where Rosa Luxemburg's body had been dumped 24 years earlier. Now, as chief of German military intelligence, he held in his trembling hands a report that challenged not only Nazi propaganda, but the entire mathematical foundation of Germany's victory. According to intercepted communications and reports from agents still operating in Mexico City, the Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant was producing one 4-engine B-24 Liberator bomber every hour. The B-24 Liberator, 1.5 million individual parts, 450,000 rivets, 30,000 separate components assembled into an 18-ton aircraft, rolling off an assembly line faster than Germany could manufacture a simple Kübelwagen military vehicle. Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz, standing rigidly at attention before Canaris's desk, had triple-checked the intelligence. The figures remained unchanged. What neither man knew was that this moment would trigger one of the most devastating intelligence failures in modern warfare: the systematic inability of German intelligence to comprehend, believe, or effectively communicate the true scale of American industrial capacity to the Nazi leadership, condemning the Third Reich through a fatal miscalculation of mathematical inevitability. The collapse of German intelligence regarding American production had begun 2 years earlier. In 1941, Luftwaffe General Karl Kohler had presented Hermann Göring with reports from military attaché General Friedrich von Boedicher in Washington stating that American aircraft production was approaching 2,000 planes per month. Göring had laughed, literally laughed, declaring that Americans could only build refrigerators and razor blades, not military aircraft. The Americans are bluffing, Göring had told Hitler at the Wolfschanz in December 1941, 4 days after Pearl Harbor. Their democracy makes them weak. Their mongrel population makes them inefficient. Their Jews make them corrupt. They cannot possibly produce what they claim. By March 1943, German intelligence networks across the Americas were reporting something that defied every assumption of Nazi racial theory and economic understanding. The reports came from many different sources: Mexican industrialists sympathetic to Germany, Spanish diplomats, Swedish businessmen traveling through Detroit, even intercepted letters from American workers to relatives in neutral countries. They all said the same impossible thing. Ford's Willow Run plant alone was producing more heavy bombers than all of Germany's aircraft factories combined. Oberstleutnant Nikolaus Ritter, head of Abwehr's Air Intelligence Section, Abteilung Luft, had spent 3 weeks analyzing the data. A former Lufthansa pilot who had lived in America for 10 years before the war, Ritter understood American industrial capacity better than most German officers. His apartment in Manhattan during the 1920s had overlooked the construction of the Chrysler Building. He had watched Americans erect the world's tallest building in less than 2 years. "Herr Admiral," Ritter reported to Canaris, "if these numbers are correct, and I believe they are, then Germany has already lost the war. It is now only a question of mathematics and time." The intelligence arrived through circuitous routes, each more dangerous than the last. Finally, George Nikolaus, who managed the Abwehr's primary network in Mexico City, had developed sources among American businessmen who traveled regularly between Detroit and Mexico's oil regions. These men spoke openly about the wonders they had seen, unaware that their dinner conversations were being carefully recorded by German agents. On February 3, 1943, American oil executive Harold Morrison attended a reception at the German-Mexican Commerce Association in Mexico City. After several tequilas, Morrison began describing his recent visit to the Willow Run facility, a tour arranged by Ford to demonstrate to potential investors the company's ability to fulfill government contracts. "Gentlemen," Morrison said, unaware that Wolfgang Blau, a German agent posing as an Argentine leather merchant, was memorizing every word, "what I saw is beyond description. The assembly line stretches for more than a mile. The building is so enormous that clouds sometimes form inside it, and at times it even rains within the factory. They employ 42,000 workers, including thousands of women, Negro women, building the most complex machine ever created. Morrison pulled out a pencil and began sketching on a napkin. The bomber has 2 bomb bays, each capable of carrying 4,000 pounds of ordnance, for engines each producing 1,200 horsepower. They manufacture them in sections, subassemblies, Ford calls them, that converge like rivers flowing into the sea. Wing sections arrive from one direction, fuselages from another, tail assemblies from a third. They meet at precise points along the line. Blau asked, trying to sound casually curious, but surely such complexity leads to frequent breakdowns and production delays? Morrison laughed. That's what Consolidated Aircraft believed. They mocked Ford and said you can't build airplanes like automobiles. But Ford broke the bomber down into 60,000 separate operations. Each worker repeats the same task again and again. A woman who yesterday was cooking breakfast for her children is now installing hydraulic lines in the tail section. They train them in days, not months. Perhaps the most detailed intelligence came through Francisco Franco's Spain. Colonel José Ungría, the Spanish military attaché in Washington, maintained close connections with American aircraft manufacturers while secretly providing intelligence to Germany in exchange for tungsten shipments essential to Spanish industry. In March 1943, Ungría attended a reception at the Argentine embassy where he met Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief and the architect of Willow Run. Sorensen, believing he was speaking with a representative of a neutral country that might purchase aircraft after the war, spoke openly about the plant's capabilities. "Colonel," Sorensen said, unaware that every word would reach Berlin within 2 weeks, "when I first visited Consolidated San Diego plant in 1940, they were building B-24s outdoors in the sunshine, each aircraft slightly different from the last, requiring 180,000 man-hours to complete. I knew we could do better." Ungría pressed for more details, claiming professional curiosity as a military engineer. Sorensen, proud of his achievement, gladly explained. "I spent one night in my hotel room in San Diego sketching the entire production flow. We would build bombers the same way we build automobiles, not by having workers swarm over a stationary aircraft, but by moving the aircraft past stationary workers. Each worker repeats specific tasks, achieving perfection through repetition." The Spaniard then asked about the workforce challenges of such a complex system. "We created an apprentice school that trains 8,000 workers every week," Sorensen replied. "Women now make up 40% of our. Women comprise 40% of our workforce. In fact, they are often better suited for delicate work, smaller hands for tight spaces, greater patience for repetitive tasks. We have Negro workers operating sophisticated machinery. We have boys of 16 managing supply logistics. Democracy's strength means utilizing all available human resources." Through Swedish, Argentine, Japanese, and Turkish channels, German intelligence continued receiving consistent reports confirming Willow Run's production rate. Swedish engineer Erik Lundberg visited the plant in March 1943 and later reported, "The factory operates with an efficiency that defies European understanding. They employ 1,600 specialized machine tools, many designed for a single operation. The capital investment is extraordinary, perhaps $200 million in tooling alone." A coded message from Japanese commander Toshikazu Omi to Tokyo, intercepted by German intelligence, provided independent confirmation. This single factory produces more aircraft each month than the entire Japanese aviation industry. By April 1943, German intelligence had assembled comprehensive data from 17 independent sources confirming the production rate. The numbers were staggering. Willow Run alone was producing 650 B-24 bombers per month at peak output, while total American B-24 production exceeded 1,400 per month. Desperate for confirmation on the ground, Canaris authorized Operation Pastorius, the insertion of saboteurs into the United States by submarine. George John Dash, leader of one of the 2 four-man teams, had lived in America for 20 years before returning to Germany in 1939. His secret orders from Canaris were to gather intelligence on aircraft production before carrying out any sabotage operations. In the early hours of June 13, 1942, Dash's team landed at Amagansett, Long Island, having come ashore from submarine U-202 shortly after midnight. Within days, tormented by the implications of his mission, and by what he already knew about American industrial capacity, Dash surrendered to the FBI. During interrogation, Dash revealed something that stunned his American captors. Canaris himself told me that Berlin does not believe your production figures. They think Willow Run is propaganda. He wanted photographs, employee counts, shipping records, proof that would force Göring to accept reality. FBI Special Agent Charles Landman asked incredulously, "They don't believe we're producing a bomber every hour?" Dash laughed bitterly. "Agent Landman, I lived here. I've seen your automobile factories. I tried to tell them that if Ford could produce a car every minute before the war, then they could certainly produce a bomber every hour during it. They accused me of being defeatist." On April 20, 1943, Hitler's 54th birthday, Canaris personally presented the intelligence to Göring at Karen Hall, the Reichsmarshal's ostentatious hunting estate north of Berlin. The meeting would become legendary among German intelligence officers for Göring's complete rejection of reality. Canaris had brought photographs, intercepted documents, and reports from dozens of sources. He spread them across Göring's massive oak table like a dealer laying down cards that would lose the game. "Herr Reichsmarschall," Canaris began carefully, "we have confirmation from 17 independent sources. The Ford Willow Run plant is producing one B-24 Liberator every hour at peak production. They have maintained this rate consistently since January." Göring, weighing more than 280 pounds by this stage of the war, picked up one of the photographs showing the assembly lines stretching endlessly into the distance. "Canaris," Göring said with contempt, Do you take me for a fool? These are obviously wooden mock-ups, props for propaganda. The Americans want us to believe they can manufacture aircraft like sausages. This Willow Run plant probably produces 50 bombers a month at most." Canaris pulled out another document, an intercepted manifest from the Pennsylvania Railroad detailing aluminum shipments. "Herr Reichsmarschall, they are consuming 16 million pounds of aluminum every month at this single plant. That is more than our entire monthly production." Göring laughed harshly. "Then where do they obtain this aluminum? From their Negro workers? From their women riveters? Canaris, you have been deceived by American propaganda." A week later, Canaris was summoned to the Wolfschanz to brief Hitler personally. The meeting included Generals Jodl and Keitel, as well as Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels. Hitler, studying maps of the Eastern Front where the Wehrmacht was preparing for Operation Citadel, the coming Battle of Kursk, listened impatiently as Canaris presented the intelligence. "Mein Führer," Canaris said carefully, aware he was risking his life, "if the Americans are producing 1,400 B-24s per month, in addition to similar numbers of B-17s, along with their fighter aircraft and British production, the aerial bombardment of the Reich will soon exceed our defensive capacity." Hitler's response was predictable. "Admiral, the Americans may be capable of mass-producing simple goods, automobiles, refrigerators, but a bomber is not a car. It requires precision, skill, and dedication. We spent 6 years preparing for war, and they claim to have achieved this in 16 months. It is impossible." General Jodl studied Canaris's figures and began calculating. "Even if we accept 1/4 of these numbers as accurate." "The figures are false," Hitler interrupted. "The Americans entered the war in December 1941. Constructing such a miraculous factory and achieving this production in such a short time is impossible." Unknown to the Nazi leadership, Canaris had obtained film footage of Willow Run operating at full capacity through American intelligence contacts in Switzerland. The film, smuggled through Spanish diplomatic pouches, showed 5 minutes of the assembly line in full operation. Canaris and his deputy Hans Oster watched the film in a locked room at Abwehr headquarters. The camera moved along the entire mile-long assembly line. B-24s at every stage of construction rolled forward at a steady pace. Workers, men and women, black and white, performed tasks with mechanical precision. A clock visible in several shots confirmed the timing. "My God," Oster whispered. "It's true." Canaris lit the film with his cigarette lighter, watching it burn. "We cannot show this to them," he said quietly. "They would accuse us of fabricating it, or of treason." In November 1943, German intelligence obtained aerial photographs of Willow Run taken by a Spanish diplomat. Photo analysts spent weeks studying the images. Their conclusions were disturbing. The parking lots contained approximately 12,000 cars, indicating three-shift operations. Completed B-24 bombers were visible at the adjacent airfield, 47 aircraft ready for delivery. The assembly line could be seen through skylights, with aircraft spaced exactly as the reports described. Rail sightings showed dozens of freight cars delivering raw materials. Hauptmann Bernhard wrote in his report, "Photographic evidence confirms human intelligence sources. Production rate appears accurate. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment." Göring, when shown the photographs, dismissed them as clever American photographic manipulation, likely scale models designed to deceive German intelligence. Dr. Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, and the only Nazi leader with a genuine understanding of industrial production, secretly obtained the American intelligence. His diary entry for May 15, 1943, discovered after the war, reveals his despair. "If the Willow Run figures are even half accurate, we face not defeat but annihilation. They produce more aircraft in a month than we do in a year. But I cannot speak this truth. To do so would sign my own death warrant." Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, head of SD Inland and a trained economist, analyzed American economic data. His report to Himmler in December 1943 was stark. The Ford Motor Company's peacetime production in 1941 was 1.1 million vehicles. They have converted this capacity to bomber production. At the present rate, by June 1944 the Americans will have produced enough B-24s alone to drop the entire tonnage of our 1940 London bombing every single day. On Christmas Eve 1943, Canaris received intelligence outlining American production projections for 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000 B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000 B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000 fighter aircraft, 40,000 total, 86,000 aircraft. Hitler's reaction when these figures were presented was immediate. The Americans claim they will produce more aircraft in 1944 than all nations have produced in the entire history of aviation. It is absurd. By February 1944, Canaris had been removed from his position, suspected of defeatism and treason. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a loyal Nazi who would never dare contradict Hitler or Göring. But reality could not be ignored forever. On February 20, 1944, Big Week, the American 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending more than 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In 6 days, they dropped more bomb tonnage than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter ace Adolf Galland told Göring, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I have counted more than 800 bombers in a single formation. These aircraft are real and they are dropping real bombs." On June 6, 1944, more than 11,000 Allied aircraft appeared over France. The Luftwaffe could muster fewer than 300 fighters in response. Field Marshal Hugo Spurl sent a desperate message to Berlin. "The enemy's aerial superiority is absolute. Our intelligence was correct. We were deceived not by the Americans, but by ourselves." By April 1944, Willow Run reached its peak production rate. That month, employees working 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week, produced 453 aircraft in 468 hours, equal to one finished B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. The plant employed 42,331 workers, including 11,000 women, 26% of the workforce, 800 African Americans, 9% of the workforce, 200 disabled workers, 3% of the workforce. This demographic reality would have shattered Nazi racial ideology completely. The groups the regime considered inferior or weak were outproducing the so-called German master race by enormous margins. After the war, surviving German intelligence officers revealed the full scale of the failure. Walter Schellenberg testified at the Nuremberg trials. We knew the truth about American production by early 1943. Every professional intelligence officer understood the numbers were accurate. But reporting this truth meant risking execution for defeatism. Hans Bernd Gisevius wrote in his memoirs, "The tragedy was not that we lacked intelligence about American production. We were drowning in it. The tragedy was that our leadership refused to believe it because it contradicted their racial ideology." The German intelligence officers who tried to report the truth paid a heavy price. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris was executed on April 9, 1945, at Flossenbürg concentration camp. Hans Oster was also executed on April 9, 1945, at Flossenbürg concentration camp. Alexis von Wren was executed in October 1944 for involvement in the July 20th plot. Hans Bernd Gisevius escaped to Switzerland and survived the war. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey later confirmed what German intelligence had reported. Willow Run produced 8,685 B-24 bombers between 1942 and 1945. Peak production reached 650 aircraft per month. The hourly production rate was sustained for months. The cost per aircraft dropped from $238,000 to $137,000. During post-war interrogations, Albert Speer was asked why Germany had refused to believe the intelligence reports about American production. To accept that Ford could produce a bomber every hour, Speer explained, would have meant accepting that our entire worldview was wrong. That democracy was not weak but strong. That racial mixing did not create weakness but strength. That women could perform men's work. It would mean admitting that we had started a war we could never win. Who would dare tell Hitler that? Rose Monroe, the real-life inspiration for Rosie the Riveter, operated a rivet gun on the B-24 production line. She and thousands of women like her had never worked in industry before Pearl Harbor. "We knew we were building something important," Monroe said in a 1984 interview. "Every rivet we drove was helping end the war. Sometimes we worked double shifts, sleeping in the parking lot between shifts. Many of us had brothers, husbands, or sweethearts flying those planes." The failure to believe the intelligence about Willow Run had catastrophic consequences. Fighter production: Germany continued producing bombers until late 1944. Resource allocation: resources were wasted on wonder weapons instead of practical defenses. Strategic planning: operations were planned to confront hundreds of bombers, not thousands. Diplomatic failure: peace negotiations were delayed because leaders refused to accept inevitable defeat. German economists analyzing captured documents after the war realized the true scale of the imbalance. Willow Run construction cost: $200 million. Total investment in the entire German aircraft industry from 1933 to 1945, about $400 million. Willow Run floor space: 3.5 million square feet, all German aircraft factories combined, about 8 million square feet. Willow Run electrical consumption: 2.5 million kilowatts per month. The Americans had built a single factory consuming more resources than entire German cities. The final accounting revealed the full scale of American production. Total B-24 bombers produced: 18, 188. Willow Run built: 8,685. Total B-17 bombers produced: 12,731. Total American aircraft produced 1940 to 1945, 297,000 plus total German aircraft produced 1940 to 1945, about 94,700. The United States produced more than 3 times as many aircraft as Germany while fighting a two-ocean war. Historians now consider the German intelligence failure regarding American production one of the most consequential in military history. It was not a failure of intelligence gathering. German agents collected detailed and accurate information. It was a failure of acceptance, leadership refusing to believe intelligence that contradicted their worldview. Dr. Gerhard Weinberg later concluded that German intelligence had accurately assessed American production capacity by early 1943. Had this intelligence been believed and acted upon, Germany might have sought peace 2 years earlier, potentially saving millions of lives. The story carries profound lessons. Cognitive bias. accurate intelligence may be rejected when it contradicts deeply held beliefs. Ideological blindness, political ideology can override mathematical reality. Systemic failure. Intelligence systems that punish unwelcome truths eventually receive only comfortable lies. Fatal miscalculation. Underestimating an opponent leads to catastrophic errors. At the 1985 dedication ceremony of the Yankee Air Museum at Willow Run, former Rosie the Riveter Rose Will Monroe met former Luftwaffe pilot Hans Rudel. Rudel asked her, "How did you build so many aircraft so quickly?" Monroe smiled and replied, "Honey, we just went to work every day and did our job. Nothing fancy. Just punch in, build bombers, punch out. Democracy isn't complicated. It's simply free people doing their best." Rudel responded quietly, "We were told democracy made you weak, that your diversity made you inefficient. We were told lies, and those lies killed millions." In the ruins of Berlin in May 1945, American intelligence officers discovered a final German intelligence report about Willow Run, dated April 20, 1945, Hitler's final birthday. Willow Run production confirmed. "We reported this truth 2 years ago. We were not believed. Germany dies not from lack of intelligence but from lack of wisdom to believe intelligence that contradicts what we wish to be true. Let future generations learn. Reality does not bend to ideology. Mathematics does not yield to mythology. Truth ignored becomes tragedy." The report was never delivered. By then, Hitler was already in his bunker. The 1,000-year Reich had only days left to exist. Thousands of American bombers, many built at Willow Run, delivered the final argument that German intelligence had tried to present 2 years earlier. The verdict of history is clear. German intelligence was excellent. German acceptance of intelligence was catastrophic. Within that refusal to believe uncomfortable truths lies a warning for all nations. Reality does not care what anyone believes. Those who reject reality in favor of ideology will eventually be destroyed by it. Willow Run built more than bombers. It built proof that democracy works, that diversity strengthens, that freedom produces results. German spies counted them all. German leaders believed none. And that disbelief destroyed the Third Reich as surely as any bomb.